going to talk about Florida. We've been talking about insurance in California, how a lot of, a couple of big major insurance companies, we got State Farm and we got Allstate, who basically pulled out of the market in California because they're just basically due to regulation and wildfires. It's been a no-go. So you got some major companies pulling out of California. When I was doing those podcasts, a lot of folks were like, "Hey, Sean, you need to talk about I almost said Portland. You need to talk about Florida. Why aren't you talking about Florida?" I have talked about Florida. I have done podcasts on this topic, but let's do it again because you guys are asking for it. So what we've got today is a state-run insurance company, which is Citizens. It started by Florida in 2002 as kind of a insurer of last resort because of that whole hurricane thing. And oh man, it's just, wiping out a lot of housing. Got to do a lot of payouts and people are losing their, home insurance. So we got Citizens is expected to drop thousands of policyholders, basically because if a big hurricane happened, they would be insolvent. Let's get into it. Why would they be insolvent? Here we go. According to a consent order for Slide, Citizen plans to shed 26,000 policies in total. Insurance agent Reed McDaniel with McDaniel Insurance Solutions of North Fort Myers pointed out that Citizens has depopulated in the past and predicts that they will have to continue to decrease the number of policies that they have. A new state law signed by the governor would allow companies to charge up to 20% more than Citizens, but they'd be able to get a private insurance policy instead of Citizens, which is a state run. All right. So maybe they might have a slight increase in their homeowners, up to 20% more, but now they don't have to carry flood insurance. So it could really be a benefit to them because the cost of flood insurance is so high. So you've had a ton of insurance carriers basically dip out of Florida after the 04 and 05 hurricanes. They were just horrific. And you've had other stuff go on. I mean, there's always something happening, right? Remember Hurricane Irma? I remember that one. That my office manager's name is Irma, and I've just brought on a new real estate agent named Irma. Yeah, not a common name. So I remember Hurricane Irma, back in the day. So you've got issues like that, and oftentimes the payout in Florida to the construction companies is crazy expensive. Policies are expensive in Florida. You've got a whole bunch of, things going on, not unlike California and their wildfires and their building of homes with proximity to stuff that's going to catch on fire. You've got some of that going on, but you've got some, with the hurricane deal and flooding being such a major factor in Florida, you've got, you replace that from the wildfire risk in California. Each coast has its own issues, right? So Citizens is requiring all policyholders to eventually get flood insurance, something they may not need with a private insurer. But if they don't have it, then they, get flooding. It is expensive. I've had my personal residence has flooded, 3 times. At one point in time, I took a video and I had a stream running through my basement, which is all finished. It was just a stream. And so if water comes from the outside, it's determined to be flooding. If it's an internal issue, like a, flooded water tank or a burst water tank, which does happen, then okay, yeah, they'll clean that up. No issues there. But flood insurance is expensive. Here on the West Coast, it's expensive? Earthquake insurance. And we're going to have a big one at some point in time. That whole San Andreas fault kind of thing. Yeah, that's going to happen. Matter of when, right? It's just a matter of when, not if. It's a matter of when. If you don't have insurance for, earthquake, which most people do not because it's expensive and it's an extra rider and you may or may not qualify depending on the structure of your home or your building, your condo building, whatever. So yeah, all these different markets have different risks associated to them, right? And in California, the state basically has legislation in place that doesn't allow the insurance companies to reanalyze risk. And insurance is all about analyzing risk. It's a numbers game, right? All right, we think the odds of this happening are this, therefore you're going to pay this amount of policy. And in Florida, you end up paying a ton more because of the inherent risk of having your house, blown away or flooded or, any of the things that can happen with a tree falling on it from the Hurricane Irma, right? So Citizens requiring all policyholders to eventually get flood insurance, something may not need with a private insurer. So it could be a silver lining for these people. That is the pro spin. It's like, okay, yeah, they don't have to, they can pay a little bit more, but then they're going to take off this one rider, which is for the flood insurance. So it's, in the end, it's going to be cheaper, right? Florida's insurance commissioner, Michael Jaworski, called the move to depopulate a good sign. All right. Now, that means you're getting some carriers in there that weren't in there before. All right. Spread that risk around, right? It's a sign of a healthy market when there are private carriers that are available to depopulate Citizens, Jaworski stated. Notices are expected to go out soon, but no word on how much more it may cost policyholders. You could have some sort of rate hike or you could have no rate hike. When are you going to have a change in policy and not have a rate hike? That's like the inevitable thing about insurance, right? Insurance carriers, according to Amica, are very empathetic because they know that it's not about the home. It's about the people that live in the home. It's about the home. That's what they're insuring. They're not doing life insurance. They're doing house insurance. Yeah, crazy. Well, that's a marketing campaign that I've been talking about a lot because I find it really annoying because it's just so disingenuous. We're really empathetic towards our folks. And yeah, we know it's all about the people. Rightio. It will entirely depend on what the individual policy looks like, Jaworski said. Citizens policyholders should closely monitor their mailbox for warnings of change. So now your average policy in Florida is going to bump up to like $4,000. And I think throughout the United States, the average policy costs about $2,200, $2,300, something like that. So the cost to insure a home in both California, that's if you can get insurance in California, if you're near, wildfire risk, or if you're on the coast, your waterfront, your beachfront. That's the one thing about Florida is you're always like, okay, yeah, you can get really inexpensive real estate relative to the West Coast, but then it might get taken out with a hurricane. I remember that, Irma, you remember Hurricane Andrew, all these hurricanes. Like, oh, I do remember that. I remember seeing the absolute carnage of Mother Nature's, weather system that just took out. Just how about that whole Brad Pitt thing where, what was that? New Orleans, I think it was. And he brought in a whole bunch of, quick pop-up homes to kind of repopulate areas. And now they're just falling apart. I remember reading that story. Of course, he doesn't have anything to do with that anymore. He was there just, help people out. He was physically there. Well, that was a hurricane too with flooding, right? That was straight up flooding in New Orleans, I believe, right? The dikes got broken and just water came through. That whole thing, when you build a city, basically on the water, it may not work out if you have any kind of water coming through, due to a storm, that whole kind of thing. But with Florida, you've had a whole bunch of companies bail out because, they couldn't make a go of it. They had to pay out too much and they were insolvent. So you had multiple companies just bail from the Florida insurance landscape. And you've got this Citizens, which, it's a insurer of last resort. If you literally can't get a policy at market rates from anybody else, you've got that going on. But some of the other reasons is that litigation in Florida on insurance claims on homes, like 77% of all the insurance claims out there in the United States happen in Florida because you've got this greater risk. So that's just what's going on. Also with Florida, the way that the payouts go, it can be up to like 3 times the cost of the damage is what a contractor can charge. So you've got a lot of this kind of not scam stuff going on, but you've definitely got some scams. And it's because there is so much money in the rebuild of Florida's, hardest hit sections. So Hurricane Andrew caused $15.5 billion. in damage, I mean, that's a massive payout for the insurance companies. So it's no wonder that a state run had to come in and basically, bail out, because Florida, let's be honest, isn't a viable market for most normal insurance companies to be operating. And they've pulled out. Same thing with Allstate and with State Farm pulling out of California. They're like, yep, nope, not viable. We need to be able to charge more. And with California, I think you had an issue where basically state law indicated that, all right, you can only, charge this much. And if you, want to do a more than 7%, I think it was, rate hike, you have to disclose the numbers that are going into why you want that much of a rate increase. And you have to basically provide the data, and no insurance company wants to do that. So the payouts that they have been doing do not equal the premiums that they've been charging for the last 20 years. That's California. Florida, you've got a, whole nother set of circumstances. You've got, you've got hurricanes, and you've got the payout on that. And that's a mass simplification of what you've got going on. And there's a handful of other stuff. You got legislation. You've got carriers that just, can't make a go of it. You've got insolvent carriers that are no longer there. So, a handful of circumstances are attributed to Florida's insurance debacle, whereas a handful of circumstances are, same deal in California. And the bottom line is this: if you have a house in California or if you have a house in Florida, you're going to be paying just a butt ton more in insurance because the risk is greater. It's not that tricky to figure out. But in California, you've got a situation where the state has basically hamstrung the insurance companies to the point where nobody wants to insure there anymore. Whereas in Florida, I think you just haven't had a major hurricane for a few years. And so people are like, hey, maybe I can make some money as far as insurance company goes. Maybe I can make some money here. Maybe the whole hurricane thing maybe that's over for a while, and we can charge some premiums 20% more than what Citizens, the state-run entity, would charge. Oh, we'll be okay. And these are new companies coming in, right? Who have not been absolutely decimated. It's risk to return. It's how much can we charge for a policy? Does this make sense? Does the risk that we're taking on, does this correlate with what we're bringing in for premiums? It's what we're going to have to find out. But the insurance deal in Florida, I mean, it's just like kind of sketchy, right? And that's if you can get insurance. Literally, if you can get insurance. And then your state-run entity, we're insolvent. If the big one happens, big hurricane, then it's not going to work out well. We're going to have a massive bailout. So that's why you've got, the governor basically stating, that's not a viable insurance company at this point in time. Because when you say if the big one happens and, you've got a company that cannot cover it, that's when the amount of money available for rebuild is just physically not there. And that's some of the stuff on Florida's end, where because of the way legislation and policy has gone, you've got this set of circumstances where insurance companies are basically stating, I don't think so. But now you've got some new companies coming. You got some new blood, right? Some new private blood. And that's what we're talking about there. So I know that I kind of ignored the whole Florida deal because Florida is the poster child for having insurance companies basically up and leave. How about FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency? Basically, flood insurance in Florida has become, it's a real thing. And, I did a podcast, I think, what was it? It was probably a couple of years ago about the whole flood insurance thing, like where FEMA is just basically not going to back any of this stuff. Just going to, it's just not happening. I think that was along those lines. But that's my last recollection of, a situation that has recently come up with Florida. And I know there's been a handful of companies that have kind of come in and out of the market, mainly companies going out of the market because the risk to return to them just hasn't penciled, just like it's not penciling in California right now. And that's been kind of the big story. So you've got some of the same characteristics going on, but to me, a lot of the California is just straight up policy and not really wanting to work with business, trying to, price fix the consumer's policy. And whenever they do that, whenever a governmental entity does that, tries to price fix public or a private business, who's it going to impact the most negatively? The consumer. So expect insurance rates to continue to go up in California. That's if you can get them. Expect, insurance rates to go up because we're saying literally, hey, we're going to let private insurance companies come into this marketplace. Would you please come in because our public one is insolvent? And that was the, insurer of last resort. So yeah, you got some similar situations, but then again, totally different, but they're similar from the standpoint of, you got hurricane versus wildfire, but situations, risk return is the bottom line in the insurance game, right? Let's analyze what the odds are of another hurricane coming through. They're high. How about with, hotter temperatures and people want to blame global warming? Are they blaming global warming on the hurricanes, or they're blaming the rise of tidal waters, right? And yet people still seem to be buying waterfront, oceanfront properties, and those don't seem to be like flooding, just, oceans just rising to the point where everything's underwater. No, that doesn't seem to be happening. Hurricane? Yes. Are we blaming global warming on hurricanes, more hurricanes? It doesn't seem like it. But we're blaming global warming on the increase in wildfires in California. We're blaming that on the wildfires in Canada, north of New York. It's all due to global warming. Is it? Or are we just kind of going through this time period where this is what's going on? That's what always kind of, comes to me. Like, how long has the earth been around? A long time. Millions of years? I mean, thousands of years? Who knows? I think when you start looking at those numbers, no matter how great the magnitude of the number of years that you believe everything's been around, we're going to look at the half-life of carbon and, get into that kind of stuff. All right, the earth has been here since then. What I see with these weather patterns right now and overall temperature increase of 1 degree over how many years? Yeah, just not really moving the needle that much. I just don't see this as being a huge deal. And yet everybody wants to point to it and say, get your electric vehicle, even though those take up a massive amount of energy and we don't have the power grid to basically support it. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on. And insurance. Yeah. You got insurance companies kind of coming in and out of the marketplace, but that's normal when you've had big payouts and things change, right? Things change. And we will have an earthquake here in Seattle. We'll have a big one. California will have a big one at some point in time. The last big earthquake I remember, I was standing in a doorway of, it's probably 5 offices back, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 offices back on Bell Red Road. And I don't remember what magnitude, earthquake it was, but it rocked the building to the point where you're like, what is going on? There was some damage done, not a ton of damage, but, older structures got impacted. Our office building was fine. My house was fine. It wasn't a big deal, but you got enough of that going on. It's pretty scary stuff, right? And so these changes are going to happen. You're going to have these changes happen. All right. So that's my foray into Florida insurance. And I covered on just some of the, briefest of topics there, but that's what you got going on. You've got insurance that's having a tricky time in both California and in Florida. And in Florida, they're trying to address, basically their state-run entity because Yeah, it's not solvent. All right. Thanks so much for being here. I'd love to have you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so that each time we put out content, which is twice a day, Monday through Friday, and once a day on Saturday and Sunday, you'll get notified. Check us out on reasonabletv.com. That's our paid subscription. We put out a couple more there per week. And then on Reasonable Plus, that's our Discord channel. If you're a Discord guy or gal, you want to check us out there. You got a bunch of stuff going on. All right. Thanks again for being here. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.